All right. He was known as the 37th president and for his involvement in the Watergate scandal. He started the war on drugs. I guess you can obviously assume who I'm referring to. His name is Richard Nixon. President Richard Nixon began his presidential role back in 1969. He proceeded to create impactful changes in the U.S. and in the world in general. Richard Milhouse Nixon was born on January 9, 1913, in Yorba Linda, California. He started off his patriotic journey as a naval lieutenant commander in World War II. After his military involvement, Nixon went on to be elected into Congress in the California district. He slowly began to climb the ladder of political achievement and was later granted a seat in the Senate in 1950. And shortly after, he was elected to vice president under Dwight Eisenhower at the age of 39 years old. Richard Nixon was finally elected into the office as the President of the United States on January 20, 1969, and immediately began to leave his mark and legacy in history. In 1971, Nixon gave the iconic speech where he declared the war on drugs and went on to state that America's public enemy #1 in the United States is drug abuse. Considering drugs was the foundation and symbol for rebellion and social revolt back in the 1960s, Nixon was looking to put a stop to it. Richard Nixon was a primary authoritative force that kicked off the war on drugs. He started off by making several efforts and regulations to further restrict drug usage in the United States. Nixon continued to make constant effort at enforcing the war on drugs by increasing the existence of federal drug control agencies, pushing for mandatory crime sentencing relating to drug usage, and for enforcing the no-knock warrant. He was even prompted to place marijuana in the highest restricted level of drug tolerance, known as Schedule 1. It's clearly evident that Richard Nixon was no fan of drug abuse, and he wasn't fooling around when he declared the war on drugs. It's a matter of fact, he was overwhelmingly serious. The idea of decriminalizing marijuana was recommended in 1972, but the idea was immediately shut down and ignored by President Nixon. Nixon made consistent effort to restrain drug abuse throughout his role as President of the United States, all the way up to his resignation in 1974. Though Nixon's race was completed relating to the war on drugs, the war on drugs itself was not even close to being done. Nixon's legacy was carried on past his presidential involvement and went on to be revitalized in 1981 with the election of the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. It's clear as day that Richard Nixon had a great impact on the war on drugs, as evident by his constant enforcement on drug restriction laws and efforts. It's a matter of fact, the war on drugs never really would have existed or at least thrived if it weren't for President Nixon. Though Nixon was known to have such a bad rap due to his involvement in the Watergate scandal, he really inflicted a great movement when considering the war on drugs. It really allows you to stop and think how such a huge movement can be vitalized just from a spark lit by a single man.